Mm.
It's not like it was in the old days. I feel like where you would have these transmittals that need to get hand delivered to the architect and it was just a nightmare. I mean, I remember my dad telling me he used to have to carry a bag of quarters as a superintendent just to make phone calls at the local payphone. And I'm like, dude, how did you guys even build these things? I'm like,
Welcome to the Real Construction Owners Podcast, where we interview real construction owners doing big things. Today, we have a very special guest, Joseph Simile, the owner of Simile Construction Services out of California. He's a master at closing big deals, commercial and government. He's going to break $35 million this year. Today, we're going to talk about investments. We're going to talk about government contracts. We're going to talk about best processes, and you're going to hear some stuff that's going to blow your mind. So stay tuned. What's up, Joseph? How you doing today, bro?
good. How are you?
Man, I'm blessed and highly favored. Thanks for asking. So what's good? What's good? Tell us a story. I want to know before we get into the goods. Talk to our audience, contractors, CEOs, government contractors. What were you doing before you got into construction?
I was running a beer and wine supply company, and it didn't make any money, but it was a great hobby. Kind of got to a point where my dad ran a construction company since I was probably a junior in high school. I got out of college. I went to school for construction management, but wasn't really big on the construction side. So I was like, I'm going to open up a hobby shop. So I bought this little small beer and wine supply store with a couple of buddies, ran that for a few years. Just realized I didn't really it wasn't as fast paced as I wanted it. Talked to my dad and saw to kind of see if there was a position. He pretty much gave me an allowance, brought me on board, and about 4 years ago I took it over. And it's been great, dude. It's been a wild ride ever since, for sure.
Nice. So your first year in business, you took it over, zero experience in construction. Walk us through some lessons you learned, some of your successes. What happened your first year of business?
When I first started, so my dad had opened up the company when we were probably my junior year of high school. And I'd work with them back and forth throughout high school and college. When I first started full time after I got rid of the beer and wine supply company, it was incredibly humbling. I remember having an anxiety attack, like in my little walk-in closet in my apartment, because I got humbled like all hell by a subcontractor. It was like, hey, you're just this boss's son. You have no idea what you're doing. He was absolutely right. And I was sitting there trying to boss him around. And so that was my first real introduction to supervision on a real job site. It was a large, probably seven at the time for us, about 6,000 square foot CPA office here in Modesto. And I just got worked by a bunch of the subs, and I wasn't humble at all. And I almost quit. I was just like, I don't know if I can handle this stuff. This is just insane. But I think with a little time and kind of understanding how to work with people, and being a little bit more humble of the fact that I honestly was given a silver spoon with my dad's company, and just an amazing opportunity. I was able to kind of bring it back and really create some good rapport with the subs and with our team now. And I've been doing it for 20 some odd years. So it's been a lot of fun, but it was definitely I would say the first 5-6 years was really tough. Went through we went through that downturn in the economy back in 2006, 7-ish. That was brutal to see. That was one of those times where I was like, I don't even know if I want to do construction. It's just, you're not getting paid anything. I had 2 kids at home. My wife wasn't working, and we had to do salary reductions across the board. And it was just like, man, this is brutal. But being able to kind of see how my dad was able to navigate those waters, it kind of brought me back in it. And now I'm really enjoying it. Obviously, construction has been great the last few years. We've had ebbs and flows since, but right now we're seeing it's still popping pretty crazy. I get a little nervous about what's coming up in the economy in the future, but still looks good and looks solid right now.
So you guys focus primarily on commercial, residential. How's your portfolio split?
Yeah, we started off doing residential, some high-end residential stuff, got out of it. Now we only do commercial. Honestly, I wouldn't touch residential with a 10-foot pole. The clients are just the client, and when you're in your own home, it's so much more difficult to work with a client because they're just very particular, which is totally fine, and I get it. When you're doing a commercial facility, owners really just want to get open so that they can start making money. So they're more reasonable and about, hey, what do we want to do to get done? The changes are generally speaking a lot less. So we really love the commercial industry. So we've done a lot of like nonprofits. I love doing the nonprofits. Honestly, we're a faith-based company, and the nonprofit sector has just been amazing for us. We do a lot of churches. We're doing 3 churches right now. And we're actually bidding on a fourth one right now too. So do a lot of nonprofit stuff. We do also do a lot of commercial, facilities. Like we're doing the Modesto Transit Center, which is
That's a government building. That's a government
that's a
building, right?
government. Yeah, that's a
So that's a
government
government
one.
contract.
Yep. Yeah, it is
And
public
and
works.
so that's awesome because I love government contracts and it's fascinating and so many contractors wanted to get into that. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I'm curious, you said you're bidding out work for these nonprofits, these churches. Walk us through your process. Do you have salesmen? Do you have estimators? How are you doing this? How are you acquiring these deals?
Well, most of it for us is a lot of word of mouth at this point. We've had established company for a long time, so we get a lot of word of mouth. We've been in business for over 20 years. Um, but generally it's a reputation thing. What we've tried to do is just create an honest and faith-based company throughout. And so a lot of the nonprofits kind of ring home with that because their goals are to help. What I've seen with the nonprofit arena is that they have with the nonprofit arena is they get kind of screwed by a lot of GCs, and so you can see it, and you hear these stories from people just like, man, were not taken care of. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to kind of step into that nonprofit arena. We are a for-profit company, so we're going to make profit, at the end of the day. But I think we can bring that level of trust to the clients where they know that they're not getting screwed. So we do from our sales side, we'll reach out and we get from architecture firms. We have a lot of architecture firms that specialize in nonprofit, so we'll focus on those. But a lot of times that they come to us and they say we have a design build project. Most of them are design build, so we'll work with them on the design from the napkin all the way to handing them over the final keys. We usually try to get pre-qualified with a diocese or with that specific church in some way, shape, or form. Once we're pre-qualified, we'll work on the plans with them. If it's a hard bid, we'll provide a hard bid proposal against other bidders, and they will go through a selection process. Ultimately, our goal is just to get to the table with the client. I don't claim to be the cheapest contractor out there, and I'll be very honest with my clients. If they're looking for a cheap contractor, I'm probably not the right guy. If they're looking for like amazing quality, if they're looking for open book style contracts, fantastic accounting, fantastic management, like that's the type of contractor we are. So our goal is basically get a really good competitive proposal that's hopefully at the lowest, but if it's not, we just want it to be in the ballpark. Our goal is really just to sit down with the clients and kind of walk them through what our process is. 9 times out of 10, it's specifically recently, all the jobs are just way over budget, right? Construction prices skyrocketing. And in addition to that, with interest rates going up, even the affordability is just not there. That's why I get kind of nervous about what's going to happen with the economy later on. But so we spend a lot of time doing value engineering after the fact. And that's kind of what we specialize in. So we'll drop a dollar amount on them with them. They're going to be, it's this shock, and they're like, oh my gosh, this
Oh
is
my God.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. This is so expensive. We're like, yeah, I know. And so but for us, we try to be just very transparent. So we will show them literally every single sub bid that we have. We'll say, hey, we got 3 to 5 bids per trade. The market is what's driving your price. It's not us. I mean, we're a very small percentage of that management cost. So what we're looking for is just to show them, hey, this is what your job costs. Let's validate what your job cost is based off of what the market is telling us with these sub bids. And then we say, hey, look, if you want to entertain with us, we can go to the drawing board with you, provide some value engineering options. And that's generally speaking what's been happening on every single job that we've been doing on the private side, and not only nonprofit, but also other private jobs. And we just work through value engineering options, whether it's managing the site work differently based on Solar's report recommendations, changing out this type of units that they're doing, material finishes, removing scope in some cases. So there's various ways to do it. I just did one. I just actually had a meeting yesterday with, it's not a nonprofit, it's a health center out in Merced, where we proposed on an $9 million project, $678,000 worth of value engineering options. The owner elected to take about half of them, right, to just help them bring that budget down. But they're moving forward with the contract. It even is over budget for them. They were able to come up with the money, but one of the biggest issues I'm seeing right now in the industry is just owners. If we're the lowest bidder on a job, the valuation, we could be the lowest bidder on a $5 million project, but the bank valuation is saying it's only worth $4 million. So now the owners are having to not only bridge the gap between our base low bid and what the highest valuation the loan will be on it. They also have to do the 70-30 gap on the loan as well. So they're coming up with like massive amounts of money to be able to do it. So we're really having to spend a lot of time on with our clients, just focusing on how to reduce budgets but still meet their needs, right? That's why we stay in the commercial arena, right? Because you can't do that in a private arena, right? Because the commercial, you can't do that on like residential side, because the residential side is like people just want what they want, right?
Yeah.
And on the commercial side,
they have a tight budget,
exactly.
where when you say commercial, you're saying commercial, private, and government. That's what, when you say the word commercial, you mean all three of those, correct?
Yes, just not residential, because on the residential side, they want what they want. On the commercial side, usually there's an income related to the work, right? They're building it out because there's some sort of income or some sort of benefit that they really need for the work that isn't, more square footage in their home, right? That's just solely, there's a value that comes in there. So it's easier to work through the budgets with them. And usually they're the larger the value of the project, usually you have a more savvy client. Which is, we love having savvy clients because it's easy to walk through issues on plans, because they understand it. They understand that there's going to be issues with plans. They understand that they most likely are going to deal with change orders, and we'll work with them on everything. Keeping everything open book with them usually keeps that level of trust that they need to continue to move the project forward. So
let's talk about, you mentioned to me some awesome projects that you've done for the government. You had a $6 million historic project. You also had that $10 million HUD project. Walk us through some of those details. How'd you get the deal? And then we're going to talk about really unique tactics and finding the best subcontractors.
Yeah. The government projects, the unique ones that we've done are the historical renovation projects. There's not a lot of contractors that just want to do those, that even want to do those, because you're dealing with like cataloging, like siding. And so like I had a job in Livermore. We did the Livermore transit station where we relocated an old historic building down to their new depot, their transit depot. And it was an old train station, historic building. We literally had to relocate lights and everything in the street as we shipped the building down. So like all the street lights were getting moved. We did it in the middle of the night. It was incredible, fun project. But you don't run into a lot of competition when you're doing these historical projects, because they take a lot of overhead to manage. So we target some of the historical government projects because usually they're well funded. And then in addition to that, they're just difficult projects to manage. So your competition is a lot smaller. So that's one of the things we kind of do on the historical side. On the other governmental projects that we would do, like we just finished like the Stan County Recorder's Office in downtown Modesto. It's not necessarily a feel-good project for us. Like there's nothing fantastic, nothing cool about it, but it's definitely one of those utilitarian-based projects that you can get in and out. It allows us to keep our pencils sharp, and make sure that we're competitive in the industry. So we find a lot of our bids on the exchanges, they're all publicly, when we're doing the government work, they're all public style projects. So you find them on some sort of public exchange. They're mandated to be, publicly put out there for all GCs to bid. And then we try to pick the ones that either fit well with the area that we're working within, or fit well with our expertise, where it would come for like historical renovations, and where we can see where we have a competitive advantage of some sort.
That's why I like government contracts, because there's niches that not very many contractors know about or even want to bid. and you
Yeah.
can really provide an excellent service. Like Hawaii, we've done some in Alaska, we've done chillers. I love chiller projects because not very many contractors are going to go after those. Historic, like you said. Do you
Mhm.
have any set aside status for your company?
What do you mean set aside?
Like Hub Zone, or 8A, you veteran owned, you woman owned?
No, no, we don't. We don't have
That's awesome. So
any
people
sub
people
status.
think people think, oh, I got to have a set aside to win contracts. But talk to our audience contractors. You don't have a set aside, and in y'all's career, approximately how many millions of dollars have y'all won in government contracts?
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, we don't do a lot of set aside. That I think the set aside stuff is a bunch of BS personally. Like I don't see, I've never seen a job where it's like, oh, we're gonna win it because or lose it because we have a DBBE or something like that. Like I've never had a job that we've like lost or didn't win because of some sort of set aside. I've had one project where we tried to like grab all those benefits during bid time, but it's so hard to do on the government jobs because you have to pick the lowest responsible and responsive bidder. Period. Like because you're competing against everyone. So the I think as much as those like set asides are great for people, I don't as a GC I don't find a whole lot of benefit to it at all.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of more for sub base for smaller jobs. Great, like do it. Some and a lot of like government contracts used to give out discounts on bids if you had 50% of your job with DBBE or some sort of like women's labor force or whatever it is. But they don't even do that much anymore. Like you rarely see those like discounts that you'll get on bids. As far as how much government work we do, it waves. Right now we have probably we have about $15 million in contracted government work. So, and we
Let's
just finished.
freaking go, dude.
I
Way to
know,
go,
dude. Yeah.
man.
Yeah, and
So
it's great. So it's great because the money's there. That's what's great about the government work is you never have to worry about the client running out of money, right? It's always going to be there. The private side is a little bit different.
okay, we're going to dive into the money in just a little bit. But before we dive into the money, now we're getting to the technical stuff. This is the stuff you contractors want to hear. So, as a government contractor, let's specifically talk about that. How are you finding the best subcontractors? Are you calling suppliers and getting subs? And if so, like, what are some of your tactics?
We use a program called Building Connected, and it's an online source for subcontractors. You can do it has a private exchange where you can post jobs privately within the exchange, which is great. And then all the subs that are connected with Building Connected can see it. It's a pretty large resource for subcontractors. There's a bunch of them out there that you can do. I don't know if Building Connected honestly is the best one, but it's definitely been great for us. Additionally, it's on the public side, as long as you can put your name on the exchanges saying that you're bidding the work, you're going to get a lot of bids on bid day. We to help getting a lot of bids and a lot of coverage is one part of it and one facet of it. But on those government jobs, you're getting all the same bids. All the GCs are getting the same bids from the same subcontractors. So your goal as a GC when you're doing government work is to create relationship and rapport with your sub base so that you can work with them on bid day to make sure that they are getting the right scope, that they have the right dollars in, that if there is a super low number in there, that you can work with maybe a sub that you're more confident with and say, why is this guy so low? Like, what is going on? And find out maybe the guy doesn't have the right scope and make sure that he can disqualify himself out and pull his bid. Because a lot of the subs, what you run into on the public side that's scary, what scares a lot of GCs is you'll get like a subcontractor, electrical subcontractor, throw out a quote, but he'll be 30% lower than every other electrical bid you have out there, right? And it's like, well, there's only two ways that he's doing it. Either he's buying the job or he's missed the scope. There's only two real options there. So you got to work with that low bidder because he's out to the other GCs, and you need that same competitive advantage that the other GCs are, right? So working with that low bidder, if you know the guy, it's great because you can communicate with him and you be honest with him, right? You say, hey, you're incredibly low. Is your number good? We don't want to have problems on this job. I'm going to, like he says, I'm going to be forced to list you because I imagine other people will, or you need to pull your bid, right? And so if you have good rapport with these subs, you can talk to them, work through their scopes with them and get them to get more reasonable numbers in there that make sense. And then also because they're delivering their bids amongst the crowds of GCs, they can kind of level the playing field with the bid.
Nice. Have you ever sought out the help from for a recommendation from a supplier to find a good subcontractor?
Yes, yeah, we do that too. We'll go through suppliers that they are like, a lot of suppliers will have specific subs that they love to work with. Usually they will not tell you unless you have a good rapport with the supplier who the top notch ones. They'll just give you a list of the guys that they supply to. But yeah, creating those supplier relationships are huge. And if you can communicate directly with those suppliers about who their bidders are and who they're providing bids to, it can help you kind of source out some more bids on bid day for sure.
Now, a little more advanced, I know that a lot of it's union and commercial. So are you familiar with using agc.org or abc.org to find subcontractors?
Yes, yeah, we don't do it. We don't use it on that side. On the public works side, I never have an issue getting subs.
And you do
we
that
don't do
through building, you do that through Building Connect?
Building Connected or the public bid exchanges. Like they have they have a bunch of public bid exchanges locally that will find it, and all the subcontractors are on them. So if you post that you have a job bidding on a specific day, usually the city or the county or the government will post it in some way, shape, or form. And if you say that you're bidding GC, you will get sub bids from them on it.
Nice.
The only time you really need to use like ABC and stuff is when you have to self-perform the work out on site. So I don't do a lot of self-perform work. I'm a paperwork GC. Heavy management. Yeah, heavy management. I do carry a small self-perform crew. And so we'll use our self-perform crew for stuff, but generally speaking, most of the work we'll get out to other subcontractors or labor forces.
Now, do you have any stories where you were negotiating with a subcontractor that you could share with our audience that like it was heavy negotiation?
Yeah, well, I mean, we negotiate every day with them. I mean, we were just negotiating 2 days ago on a client came to me and says, hey, our project budget's 3% high. I'm like, all right, cool. So I called up every subcontractor and let them know if they want the job, they got to drop their number by 3%. And they're hard negotiations to have, especially with prices rising, right? Most of those negotiations, I mean, again, revolve around rapport, right? And then also it's like a lot of the hard negotiations deal with when subcontractors have issues, right? So if they have issues on a job, I had an issue with a subcontractor recently on a job where the issue is large enough that it could bankrupt the subcontractor, right? So trying to figure out a way to keep this guy alive and going, but also not pull a ton of money out of my pocket is really hard on the negotiation side, because at the end of the day, you're only as good as your sub base, right? So if you bankrupt your subs, that gets around pretty bad. And so then you'll start losing subs, and you really want to make sure your subs are good. So I find as a GC, sometimes you got to come to the table with the subcontractors, even with their own errors, to just keep your sub base. It does give you a lot of roadway with those subs though, right? So like in particular, this one sub.
What happened? What happened with that specific scenario?
So in this subcontractor, we had an architect that released a set of drawings on basically what he did is he took a 24 by 36 set of drawings. He shrunk it down to an 11 by 17 set just so he could read it better on his printout on his desk, scanned them, and then sent them out to the GCs to bid. But now they're not scalable at all, right? So the subcontractor, you can figure out the scaling if you use like your Bluebeam or anything like that, but you can't do it if you're printing out your plans, right? So when he's done that, he's taken away the ability to do hand scaled takeoffs. And a lot of the subs that we work with, they're just old school GCs, man. They don't want to do it online. So he took everything off, realized the square footages were way off, and he missed all the siding by like 5,000 square feet of siding. Just a massive hit.
Oh
and
my
so
God.
he comes in and we have pretty good relationships with all these guys. He comes in and says, look, we got a problem. We screwed up on this takeoff, and we got a $30,000 issue on this job. And I can't afford it. In addition to that, and I feel bad for this sub, in addition to that, he also got robbed on the job site. He lost about $50,000 worth of material over a weekend on that job site. And because
California,
dude, welcome to the area. Yeah,
Compton, baby. Oh my God,
dude, it's bad. We're doing it. This is a credit union in a low income area. So we had already told the client they really need to get security out there. It's going to delay the job. And that's what happened, is that they came in, just completely ripped us off. Um, it's easy to get money back, like on builder's risk on those type of things when it's installed product, but if it's not installed, it's the subcontractor's risk. And so this sub is just like, look, man, I've lost over $60,000 right now. What do I do? Like, I just don't have the money for this. So we had to
You're
figure
lucky
out
that you had that conversation. He didn't just bail.
yeah. Well, that's why you have to have rapport, man. Like if you don't have rapport with these guys and they bail, you're screwed. That's so like what we had to do with him is like, okay, we need you to finish the job. What do we need to do to make this right? So we were able to get his books opened up with him, walk through what he needs to be able to get his costs paid for, and dealt with that. We're going to try to make it up on other projects where he's going to give me discounted rates on other projects where I can try to make some of that money back. But that's how you have to do it, man. You have to work with these subs and say, look, I know you got a problem. We have to figure it out over the long haul, because the jobs independently can't bear the burden of these problems. So that's the type of negotiations we deal with these guys. Bidding negotiations is a lot easier because it's like you know where the number needs to be. You just need to figure out a way to get the scope dialed in properly with that subcontractor. And if there's value engineering associated with it and all that stuff, you can deal with that. But when it comes to problems, that's where the hard negotiations are, because now you're saying, okay, how am I going to make up this cost? As a GC, do I want to go after this guy? Can I afford to help him out? If I can't afford to help him out, what's going to happen to my sub base when this guy goes bankrupt because of these issues? Like, is it gonna go out and other subs are going to be like, this GC just bankrupt the sub, I don't want to give him bids anymore? So you really have to play the balance, specifically in the public arena, but also in the private arena, on taking care of your subs, man, because they'll stop bidding you. And at the end of the day, man, if you're a paperwork GC like me, where you do heavy management, not a lot of self-perform, you're only as good as your sub base. There's nobody. If you don't have a good sub base, you're screwed. So
Yeah, it's so crucial. Contractors listening in, we're talking to you. You have to build a database of contractors, subcontractors. Like for myself, I have subcontractors in Hawaii, Alaska, Ohio, New York, all the places I've done government contracts in. So if one of those government contracts comes into my vision, I can call them and say, hey, let's get this done. I need a price. And you got to have those good relationships. So I'm curious, have you ever used a site visit sign-in sheet on a government deal to pick up the phone, or your estimators pick up the phone and find out who the GC is versus who the sub is, and then find the sub to give you prices? Have you ever used a sign-in sheet where it says 10 people who went to the site visit and worked out a deal using that tactic?
absolutely. If you don't know who your competition is, what are you in the business for? So
Right.
yeah. No, we do a lot of research on competition, because if we find that we do a site visit and we find that there's a mom and pop GC bidding something, like I have overhead. Like I have significant overhead. If there's a mom and pop GC bidding a job, they're going to beat me every single time. Like, and it doesn't bother me at all. I just won't bid it at that point. So I really want to know as a GC who my competition is. So when we go to these site visits, we'll find out who our competition is, and then we'll pull out of that competition and be like, okay, who are the subs that came to this site walk that are not GCs? And then we get those subs. And now we know those subs are engaged in the project because they spent time going to the job site. So now all we got to do is get a hold of them, build some relationship, and make sure we get their bids in. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then from there, have you even went as far to say, hey, you were there, who else should I be talking to? Like what else needs to get done? And then they give you other subcontractors that they've done business with. Have you ever done anything
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah, they won't give us their competition, but they will give us people that they like working with. I just had
Yes.
that on I just had that on a commercial facility that we're doing. I call it the unicorn project. It is the largest job my company's ever pursued. We're in the middle of negotiating with the contract with the company right now. It's $75 million apartment complex. It's literally twice the amount of sales that we do in a year. This owner has just been, I don't know. I don't even know why I'm at this table. I have a total imposter syndrome with this job, but it looks like it's going to go to contract, so we'll see. But I just had that. I just had that with the framer, and I'm like, hey man, I'm looking for some good plumbers And on these jobs, because we couldn't find good plumbers for this project. Honestly, the sub base associated with this apartment complex is just, we don't have a sub base like that, because our work is like, 15 million to like 5 million is our bailiwick. This job is at 75 million. It's substantially higher than a project that we've ever done. We're taking a big stroke out. I mean, we're swinging for the bleachers, so we'll see where it goes. But we didn't have the sub base, so that's exactly what we had to do. We called the framers, says, "Hey, who's the electrician? Do you like working with? Who's the plumbers?" And so we actually got the MEP team, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing team, all from the framer. And at the end of the day, all the bids for that team ended up being the right bids for the job. So now I have a list of subs that have worked together, know the issues, and specifically on these big ones, it's awesome, man.
Let's go.
On these big ones, if your subs know each other, the framers use this plumber because he's not going to butcher my walls, right?
Yeah.
If you use this other plumber, then I'm going to add more money to my budget. And it's like, geez, dude. And specifically with these big jobs, because that amount of money, those errors, they repeat themselves. Like, this is a 9-10 building complex. So you miss it on one building, you multiply that issue times 10. And so the numbers increase exponentially. So that's a huge go to be able to communicate with these subs about who do you like working with? Who are the people that you want that are going to bring you in more money, that are going to make you more efficient, right? And then how do I become that GC for you, where you're giving me the better pricing, and how am I managing you in a better way? You know what I mean? You really got to ask a lot of feedback from your subcontract base and really service them. I mean, you really have to. If you don't, if a subcontractor can make money working for you, if they can not only make money, but get paid on a timely manner, subs will go head over heels for you, because there are GCs out there that struggle with timely payments, that struggle with concise scheduling, so an efficient scheduling. Subs they end up charging more for those GCs than they do otherwise. We'll get discounts from subcontractors upwards of 8 to 9% just because we're the GC that we're doing the work with. Because we spend a lot of money on management and not a whole lot of money on self-perform. Now, as we grow, that may change. We may have to do more self-perform, but right now it's been pretty good from the paperwork side. We don't do a whole lot of self-performance right now. So
love it. Now, last couple things on subcontractors. Well, with that being said, do you have some type of follow-up system within your organization where you're following up, where your estimators are following up with contracting officers, so they see you as the contractor of choice, and they're like, man, this guy checks up on me every 45 days, and you're top of mind awareness to those contracting officers?
Yeah, we do our best. That is always a struggle. What we try to do is twice a year we do a subcontractor appreciation. We just had one actually 2 weeks ago, where we had in 75 different subcontractors from the area, did a big lunch for them, and just tried to create that rapport. Our estimators are our relationship builders with our subs. Our contracts for Simile Construction, all of our contracts, basically what our estimating department does is they hand our operations department a package and say, these are the people that you should bring to contract. And then our operations department will review all the proposals that we have, and they'll shake it out and see if there's any buyout, see if there's any misses that we had in estimating and stuff like that. So what we're constantly trying to do is provide feedback to our subcontractors about where they sit, right? So if we usually will release any feedback to subcontractors. We'll release that feedback to subcontractors about where they stood after we've either been contracted or no, we haven't been contracted. And we'll give them that feedback back. So once we understand the results of the bid, then we'll go ahead and release feedback to the subcontractors about where they landed on the job. And then as we're doing our bids and as our estimators are making our phone calls to ask for additional pricing on other jobs, they're communicating with that same estimator or that subcontractor saying, hey, I just want to let you know where you stood on the other job. You were in third place. You were 10% high. Make sure you sharpen your pencil on this one, right? And so we're able to build that. And so a lot of it happens really naturally. So there's no real guy on the phone just trying to like create rapport. It's more about, hey, we got a project. I want to make sure that you know where you sat on the last one so that you can have a better opportunity on this one. And hey, by the way, are you coming to our subcontractor appreciation party? We got a lot of swag we want to give you. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
we focus on our big focus with our estimators that we do is it's not the focus really isn't on the takeoff, right? The focus is on creating the relationship with the subcontractor. If we can create solid relationships with subcontractors, our subs are going to do those takeoffs for us, and that's what they do, and we rely on them for it, right? I've had subcontractors tell me, "Hey, I want to include my quantity takeoff into our contract." I was like, "Dude, you're the expert, man. I'm not going to sit here and be contracted for quantity. Or you're either for pans and specs or you're not. That's the reality of it. So I'm not going to include quantities in any sort of subcontract with any subcontractor, but you got to have some good rapport with a subcontractor for him to be and say, okay, I'm going to take full responsibility for my own takeoffs. I'm going to move this
For
thing forward.
so are you saying do y'all in y'all scenarios like this, are they pitching to y'all in their estimate materials and labor or just labor? So talk to us about
Materials
that.
and labor. It depends on the scope. Most of the time, if most of
If
the
you
time
need
it's
to be real
materials and
competitive, if you need to be real competitive, I'm sure y'all just do just the labor.
yeah. The only thing you have to watch out for is when you're buying product, like if you can put it on a subcontractor to buy all the product, now you have the warranty with that subcontractor on any issues that happen later on down the road, like a year down the road, and says, "Hey, I got a light that went out." The subcontractor's like, "That's great. You're gonna have to pay me to go out there and reinstall that light for you." But you can go get a free fixture because the fixture's under warranty. Now, if the subcontractor had bought that light, now he's responsible for the labor installed to be able to address the warranty claim. So we do our best to keep if we can manage it within the budget, we do our best for our subcontractors to purchase all the materials, but we be really prudent about the materials that we do purchase because anything that we purchase that we need to install, we as the company, as a GC, are going to have to warranty any of that work. So in the event there's a failure with that material, whatever that material is, we would have to go out a year later and go ahead and perform that work. So the more that we can belittle risk, and I would say anybody that's doing like public works or big commercial projects, the game is belittling risk, man. You want to get as much risk off and pushed off to your subcontractors as possible. And the only way to do that is again to build rapport with subcontractors. These subcontractors need to know that you're not going to screw them. So
Yes, and in a little bit, we're going to talk about your departments, and we're going to talk about taking risk off your construction company. Thanks for bringing that up. But before we do that, I'm curious regarding your subcontractors. It sounds like you really take care of these guys. And do you ever find where they're like, "Hey, Joe," or "Hey, estimator for your company, I got this project. It's a government project. I want to work with y'all on it," and they actually bring you deals?
yeah, yeah, it happens. It
Nice.
happens all the time for us. We have it. That happens all the time for us. A lot of metal building guys. That's where I get the information because people will reach out for like metal building suppliers in during design phase. And so I'll get a call from like one of the guys that we use a lot. It's called Panelized Structures. They're here out of Modesto as well. They'll call us up. They say, "Hey, I got a call from a client about a metal building that he wants to put up, but he needs a GC. We went ahead and recommended you. Would you be willing to partner up with us on it, or can we get you on a conference call with this owner? Because we'd love to work with you guys on it." Because they just know we run a tight ship, right? So that's part of that, right? As you build that rapport with subcontractors, you follow through with making sure that they're making money that they expected on every single one of their projects. And if they can continue and know that they're going to be profitable with you as the GC, they're going to keep giving you bids. And it's good. You get bids that way. We do that all the time. Yeah.
I haven't checked your Google presence. You don't really need it in commercial and government, but do you all have some type of process where you're like, "Hey, subcontractor, you did a good job. I'm going to leave y'all 5-star review. Y'all need to do the same to us." Do y'all have anything
No,
like
that's
that?
a great idea, though, dude. I'm gonna write that shit down. No,
Dude, I do it. It works.
I believe it. I actually, when I took the company over 4 years ago, we that is something that I've been trying to push. So we actually updated our just recently. We updated over the last 3 years ago. We updated our website. And now we're keeping our website up to date, which is good with ongoing pictures. We're also have a subcontractor portal there where they can see our subcontract verbiage, waivers of subrogation. We have a client portal as well. So we're starting that process. We're just starting, honestly, we're just starting to have like a social media presence. I haven't seen any major results from the social media side yet, but I'm still working around that. I did this year. I took a big step. We're putting together informational videos for our clients. One of the things we find from our clients is that they just don't know. You get a lot of one-off clients when you're doing jobs that are like $5 million or like even less, like $1 million. These clients, this will be the largest project and only project they will ever do, right? Like this, if I do like a 15 to $20 million project, if I push those ranges, those clients are usually reoccurring builders, right? They're going to be building, they're very savvy. So when you get those one-off clients, they get nervous. And so but they're great jobs to do too, because you're working with people that are owner operators that just they have a love for their business and they just want to have this fantastic building or this fantastic improvement, and they don't want to get gouged on it, right? So what I'm trying to do is what I just did and started recently with a local marketing company was we're doing informational videos about right now. The first one we did is just on contract types, like, hey, what are the contract types out there? There's stipulated sum, they're guaranteed max price contracts, and what do they mean and how do they relate to your project? So we're actually going to be releasing a couple of videos over the next year. Our goal is to do a series of 10 videos over the next 3 years, but a couple of videos that are just informational videos that we can send to our clients to let them know where they're at, and what stage of the project. Hey, this is the rough carpentry, or this is the rough framing stage. This is what you're going to find, and this is when you're going to want to come out here and make sure the outlets are in the right locations and stuff like that. Because that's what we're finding is that a lot of clients just don't know what they're getting into. Construction isn't rocket science, but man, people literally don't know like what they're getting into and how to like all the stuff and all the facets behind it. So we are trying to create that informational presence right now, but I have not done anything on the review side, which is something that is on our list. It's just, it hasn't been up there because we get most of our stuff is word of mouth.
Dude, I'm going to connect you with Ralph Locklear. He has Southeastern General Contractors, and
Mm.
he is like yourself, advanced savvy GC, and he makes some epic content online that generates a lot of business for him. So I want to connect you two because so that way you can see what he's doing, get some ideas, and
I'd love
crush it
it.
even more.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd
for
love it.
sure. So now let's dive into federal construction secrets. Now, you talked about protecting yourself and
Mhm.
taking risk off you. So I want to talk about bonding. What are ways that you're increasing your bonding? And what are ways that you're protecting your company using bonding as a strategy to make the subs get the bond on the old job?
Yeah. Um, Generally speaking, we to increase our bonding, you have to have equity in the company, right? So they want to look at making sure that you're highly capitalized in the company, you have good backlog, but you don't have excessive backlog. So it's always this kind of balancing act of how much money are we going to leave in the company uh, at the end of this year to increase our bonding based off of the type of work that we're going to be going for. So we're always kind of managing that to say, do we want to expand our bonding capacity? Do we need bonding capacity? A lot of times when you're in the private arena, you don't need bonding capacity at all. So it's like because all the jobs, no matter the size, at least for what we've been doing. I mean, I just did a $10 million project that didn't require any sort of bond. So a lot of it all kind of depends on the type of work that you're going after. On the government side, you just have to be real careful. Like we're having that conversation today, in fact, with my CFO about that $75 million unicorn that we're going after, right? If I did that $75 million unicorn, I'm going to have zero bonding capacity. Even though that job is not bonded, it's not a bonded project for me. It's $75 million job, not bonded, which is great. My bonding company looks at the backlog and says, this is more backlog than you're used to, and we're going to hold up the bonding for it. So you're constantly trying to address like what are the projects that you want to plug into your backlog and how is it going to affect your bonding. What we do at trying to belittle risk, if the project budget can afford it, we'll have subcontractors go ahead and bond specific portions of the work if they have the capability to do so. It's a
That's
good
it.
opportunity. Yeah, it's a good opportunity to do so. The problem with it doesn't necessarily take away your need to bond it, right? So you're still going to, if you're doing a public job, they're still going to force you to bond it as well. the entire dollar amount, including the cost of the subcontractor that you're bonding. It does belittle some risk if you find a subcontractor that's way low and they're like, look, I'm not pulling my bid, and you're still really concerned about how low they are. You can say, hey, are you willing to bond this job? Right. And usually those bonds for them are, 2%.
2.5%.
Yeah,
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 3%.
2.5 to 3%, depending on where like sub it is and what trade it is and what rates they have, right? So that's where we have to work with those subcontractors. So we usually, if we have a sub that's really low, it says, hey, I got everything, we'll include money in there to bond him so that we have a bonded subcontractor, so that if he does bail on it and the project's large enough, we can make sure that we're covered with him. That going through that bonding process, if the sub fails, is, even if he fails, is a horrible process to go through, and it's not easy. So it doesn't necessarily it belittles the dollars of risk, but it doesn't belittle the headache that you're going to deal with it. So generally speaking, I don't like bonding subs. I only will look at projects that I can do. I very rarely will bond subs, because it means that if I'm having to bond a sub, it means I don't have confidence in their number. I'm going to have problems and management problems, which is going to take up more bandwidth, which is going to keep me from getting other profitable projects.
What are some strategies that you are finding yourself implement to protect your construction company, whether it's on the job to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to as per the scope, or whether it's insurance? You just mentioned bonding. What are strategies you're implementing to protect yourself specifically in these government projects?
On the government side, there's not a whole lot of protection from the client, because the contracts are usually delivered by the city, county, state. Like, so you're dealing with whatever they're dealing with. The strategies that we have to do is on the subcontract level, right? And so on the subcontract level, it's how you contract your subs, making sure that you're not putting quantities in your subcontractor proposals is key. Like, you are not doing the takeoff, they are doing the takeoff. They provided the estimate, they're the expert, let them deal with the quantity issues. Subcontractor says, I got 200 lights, that's fantastic. I'm just saying you have all the lights in the plans. I'm not saying that you have 200 lights. So that's one thing I would say, is to protect yourself, is to stay away from quantity takeoffs included in the estimates, and do not include their proposals into your base contracts. The other thing you want to do with your sub base is make sure you have timeframes associated with their submittals, making sure they get their submittals in. A lot right now, you're dealing with extended timeframes, purchasing materials and getting them in on lead times for that. So knowing that you're going to, from a sub, that you're going to have a full-blown submittal within 5 days of signing the contract is good, because now it puts the onus on you get that submittal, you look at it, produce it out to the owner, and now the owner, it's on them, and they're the one holding up the process. So your goal is, whose monkey is it, right? You want to push that monkey either onto the sub, and you grab that monkey, you put it up onto the owner, and that's the way you got to do it. So you're really managing on a subcontract level. The other thing you do is got to have really good insurance, man. So making sure that your subcontractors are insured properly. Signing waivers of subrogation is a big thing. That basically lets the subcontractor know that they're going to be responsible for their issues in the event that there is some sort of legal issue. We set up in our insurance agreements that they will indemnify us in the event that we get sued or have an issue with an owner regarding their work, right? So their insurance will pick up the legal litigation associated with any sort of lawsuit that comes associated with their work, which means I forego all the legal fees. So I had one.
Wow.
I've only had one lawsuit at Simile, thankfully. I know.
Dude,
It's
I
an
need you to
awful.
forward that to me. That's like,
I'll
please.
send you. You can
That-
get our subcontract on our website, honestly. But basically, the way we set it up is that we want their insurance. We want anything that comes in. I had one job that I had a lawsuit on. It actually really sucked. The client was removed from the site. His wife had died in the middle of construction. He removed himself. He had his manager. He had a manager that was it was a car dealership. He had a manager trying to run it. The guy literally didn't know what he was doing. Signed all these change orders, and then at the end of the job, we're like, we don't want it. You know what I mean? We like the owner's like, my guy wasn't supposed to sign all that stuff, but we had already done the work. Ended up having to go through a legal battle trying to get this. One of the things that they do, clients will do when they're entering into a legal battle, is they're going to try to do a countersuit of some sort. They're going to try to sign some sort of defect claim to be able to offset the cost of what they owe you. That's the strategy that they use in litigation. So that's a really great strategy for a client, because what that does is that they put a lot of legal burden on the GC itself to not only fight for the money that the GC wants, but to defend themselves against some sort of arbitrary legal claim, right? So the arbitrary legal claim that they were coming in was, they're like, the stucco isn't good enough, right? They had issues with the stucco. The stucco was totally fine, right? But because they actually sued us, we had to defend ourselves against these issues that they were claiming that they were having with the exterior stucco. I didn't want to hire a legal team to be able to do that, because it was going to be a year and a half of back and forth with legal. So what we had our subcontractor, because he indemnifies us through our subcontract agreement, carry the legal fees associated with the defense. So now my subcontractor's insurance company provides me attorneys to defend us against the client regarding their issue. So it was fantastic. You ultimately get free legal service out of it. A lot of subcontractors don't want to do that. A lot of insurance companies don't want to do that, but they will, and they do all the time. I know that they do, because that's exactly how I would say, on a negotiated standpoint, I would say that we would do probably 95% of our subcontracts are contracted that way. Some contractors will lean hard the other way, and depending on the scope of work, we'll go ahead and waive that. Like with major trades like electrical, mechanical, plumbing, structural trades, we won't waive it. It's absolutely, because there will be, if there's an issue with plumbing that comes in down the road, I don't want to have to hire legal counsel to defend it. I want the subcontractor to be able to defend me. And that's how we set up our subcontract agreements. But if it's like partitions and accessories, I probably am not going to do it, because the issues with the partitions and accessories are going to be much cheaper than whatever I'm going to pay in some sort of legal fee with it. I could just go ahead and take care of it, because I'll never even deal with a legal fee when it comes to partition and accessories, you know? So you got to kind of wait this out.
Dude, you just dropped some serious bombs. Like, I'm definitely going to need to find your subcontract agreement, because it sounds like it's got some wise tactics inside of it. Now, with that being said, you have these projects going. You're a paper contractor, which means you're basically organizing everything, you're managing everything, and your experts, the subcontractors, are getting it all done. That's what I do as well. I'd like for you to share with our audience how you manage these projects. Like, do you have somebody you send out to manage your subs? Do you make them take photos on company cam? Do you have liquid damages inside of your subcontract? Do you, like, what do you do to make sure the tactics I just implemented to make sure it's getting done properly?
So the first part is just making sure that step one is making sure we bring the sub to contract in the fashion that we want to make sure he's contracted, right? So we have to grab his proposal. We shake out his proposal after the owner says, hey, it's your job. Here's your contract. Go to town. So we grab his proposal. We look at it. And we say, okay, here's your subcontract agreement that we've drafted. We'll send it out to them. Usually, because of all the subs, they've worked with us a lot. We kind of spread it out as much as we can with our subs, because you don't want to overwhelm them. But generally speaking, most of our subs just sign our subcontract and send it back. Every now and then you'll get red lines that you need to deal with, that they're like, hey, we don't like this, we don't like this, we don't like this. We have to negotiate through those, and we'll decide based on risk whether or not we're going to accept some of that. We do carry a liquidated damage clause in our subcontract agreement to deal with delays. It's very minimal, but it does bring them to the table in the event that they're causing delays. It's about $500. Yeah, it's a really basic one. It's only $500, and it's whether or not that there's any sort of liquidated damages with the project. We're going to have a $500 LD that's associated with subcontract delays. A lot of time that gets negotiated out depending on, like, again, if it's a partitions and accessory sub, they're not going to delay our project, right? If it's an electrician, they are definitely going to delay our project, and so they have the ability to. So we're going to want to make sure we negotiate that a little bit heavier. Once we get the terms in place with the subcontract, then it's about working through the submittal process with them as quickly as possible so that we can work through procurement of all their materials. Once we can work through the submittal process, get their materials procured, now we can start working out on site. The way we manage our subcontractors, we use an online program called Procore. It's pretty substantial within the industry. It's one of the best online management softwares I've ever seen. So we run all of our subcontracts, daily field reports, plan development, documents, RFIs, submittals, everything all through the online program. It's super accessible by your phone. Most of our superintendents literally can manage an entire job site through their phone. They take daily pictures, they'll do observation reports on it, safety near misses on it, notifying subcontractors. We'll send out RFIs. It automatically, if it's a 5-day turnaround requirement by the spec, that RFI will go out, and after the 5 days, if they haven't got a response back, Procore will literally ding that architect every single day until he gives us a response. So we use that online project management software has been huge for us. We implemented that about 6 years ago. The only issue I would say with Procore that you got to be aware of is that they're an IT company, not a construction company. So you are going to get a price hike every single year without failure. So that's the thing. You just got to kind of figure out how to manage into your budgets and manage into your overhead as you're trying to either grow your company, or if you don't want to grow your company. I mean, I just read a book called Small Giants that has been fantastic, and it's not necessarily about growing your company. It's about choosing to stay at a specific area, specific sales, to increase the profitability and the standard of your life, right? Versus just this constant growth, right? So you got to really kind of decide what you want to do. And with Procore, the hard part that I struggle with Procore is that it leans towards you have to grow to support the program, but it does help out a lot, and it does release a lot of overhead if you're doing things from a paperwork side. So we just try to keep track of our subcontractors on that basis, and we just make sure that we work through it. And our big thing is like follow the process, man. It's really simple. You got a question, email it to us as an RFI. We'll go ahead and get it answered. You respond if there's a price increase. If there is a price increase due to that RFI, we'll send the owner a change order. Don't do the work until the change order is signed. Once it's signed, we move this process through. So what we try to do with our subs is we try to force the process. We tell them every single time it's the same damn thing, dude. Don't do work without change orders. Don't do work without stuff in writing. Like, that's the reality. If you guys start doing it, once you start going outside of that realm, a lot of GCs will go outside of that realm and things get busy, and then it bites them in the ass later on down the road. So really making sure that you're staying within those processes consistently is what's gonna drive your sub base. It's like, hey, did you send me an RFI? Well, no. Well, I need an RFI. Let's do this process. I know it's formal. I appreciate that, but that's the kind of ship I run. I don't want it informal. Like, informal crap creates bad projects. Like, I want to make sure we're formalizing everything and walking through the process. And the way Procore does it online right now, it's so fast. I mean, you can issue an RFI from your phone. It's ridiculous. So it's not like it was in the old days. I feel like where you would have these transmittals that need to get hand delivered to the architect, and it was just a nightmare. I mean, I remember my dad telling me he used to have to carry a bag of quarters as a superintendent just to make phone calls at the local payphone. And I'm like, dude, how did you guys even build these things? I'm like, they built like the Eiffel Tower with this shit. Like, that's crazy. How did you do that? Like, without a cell phone? It's mind-boggling to hear. So I think that with technology, really leaning into technology has been a huge help for our subs to make sure that they're performing properly.
So, man, take a sip of water. You just dropped some more bombs. Like, I'm taking all this in, and I'm just curious, like the buyout process, because most of a handful of the government contracts that I've done have been zero money down deals, meaning like I don't have to put any money down. My subcontractor pays for everything. I deal with all the submittals and the paperwork, and every time I get a payment, I pay my subcontractor immediately. Do you do zero money down deals where in the past, have you done them where it didn't cost you anything, your subs pay for everything, and you basically are just facilitator, and when you get your money, you pay them immediately?
Yeah, that's pretty standard actually of how we do work. Like, we California doesn't have the law that is paid when paid, right? We have to pay our subcontractors within what's ever dictated within our timeframes in the subcontract agreement, no matter what. But there is that whole concept from subs that they understand. It's like we're not here to cash flow our client. Our goal is for our client to cash flow the project. So what we try to do with that is we try to build enough money into the front end of the project to deal with what we perceive to be any cash flow issues. So we'll try to build our schedule of values where our
Yes.
mobilization. Yeah.
Yes.
So you have to build some money into those just to deal with cash flow. Most savvy clients they know that, right? They know that you're trying to build a little bit of money on the front end. So they're gonna watch that. So there's this like kind of give and take that you got to work with your clients to see what you can get on the front end to help your clients out. One of the things I could say about being a contractor, though, is cash is king. Like if you got cash in the bank, the ability to be able to maneuver issues with payments with subcontractors, delays in payments from clients, you have ways to around it. So if I have issues getting a payment with a subcon or a client, whether it's a public project or private project, what I end up doing is I still cash flow the subcontractors. That's my goal. Like I want to make sure I draw them out to the max of my subcontract agreement because I don't want to cash flow them. I'm not a bank. But generally speaking, if I have to pay them in advance of getting paid, what I do is I usually negotiate a rate with the subcontractor that says, look, I'm not a bank, but if you want me to play the bank and because my client's not paying me, I can give you money prior to being paid at a 5 or 6% discount on that dollar, right? So a lot of times what we do is we will actually use the cash that we have in the bank to make more money with our subcontractors for early pay because we get a lot of early pay discounts. Like you get like from suppliers, you get like 2 10 net 30s, where it's like if you pay, you get a 2% discount in 10 days, or you have to pay the full amount in 30 days. With our subcontractors, a lot of our sub base understands that whether or not our contract dictates that we have to pay you within 45 days, they understand that cash flow is really the reality of the game. And they're not going to sit there and sue you if you're at 55, 60 days on in the rears on a payment because your owner hasn't paid you. And a lot of that is because you built rapport with the sub. You're in it as a team, right? You're like, hey, how can we make this work? Like, and so what we end up doing is we try to use the heavy cash that we have as not only as a safety net with our subcontractors to make sure our subcontractors aren't drawn out by the long payment structures that you have on public cycles. Like public billing cycles usually are 60 to 75 days. Like you have to have some cash flow to be able to deal with it, right? Subcontractors usually want to get paid within 30 to 45 days, right? So what we end up doing, because it's a public arena project, the subcontractors already know the billing terms with the client. It's in the public bidding document, so they have to deal with that anyways. So anything earlier than that, we will usually let the subcontractor know is that if you want to get paid earlier, we need a discount. So we actually try to make an extra percentage point on early pay if we can get that with our subcontractors. And so we just make our money work for us a little bit. Which is good. You got to be careful with it because you can't do it on all projects, and depending the amount of money that you have in the bank, you got to be careful because you want to keep your own cash flow good. But if you have the capital to be able to do early pay with the subs, not only do they love you for it and give you great pricing for it, but you usually get discounts from the subcontractor to provide payments early too.
So you're doing all these projects all over a section of California. You have an
Mm-hmm.
office location somewhere in California, and I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
you've come across this where it is a situation where you have to have a local office requirement in order just to bid the deal. This is doesn't happen often. You might not have the answer for it, but that would be epic if you did. How do you overcome the local office requirement when you don't have a local office?
We had one local office requirement that we had to do in Southern California, so we just opened up an office. That was one of them. That was a bad idea. Looking back at it, it was like, why did we do that? We had the way we've done it, the way we would do it now after doing it wrong the first time, because we went
Yep.
out. I mean, we had a job in Victorville, and we had probably 3 or 4 projects in the area, and there was another job that came up. It was like, hey, you have to have a local office requirement. My PM lived in the area. We could have just used his address. right? That's a simple solution. For some weird reason, I didn't think about that solution. And it's just my own experience. I'm still learning. You know, it is what it is. So we went out and got an office, signed a lease on it, and it worked fine. It was good. It kept us going. But we ended up closing that office down about 2.5 years later because the work kind of dried up. And that's what I feel like happens with a lot of those local office requirements. Like if you are going after a job that has a local office requirement, if you're making a goal to have like a big section of work in that area, then do the local office requirement and then jam, like find other like 5 or 6 other projects to build in the area to make it worth having a local office. If you
Or
can't
just
do
use
that,
your
or
PM's
just use
address.
your PM's address. I mean, it depends on the style of work. Like we actually needed an office because you have when we were doing 4 projects there at the time. There was one job that required a local office, so we were like, we actually could use like a little warehouse in that area right now. But just over time, like we didn't decide that we wanted to build up an entire resource network down there, and so we ended up closing it down a couple of years later. Our PM actually moved up north, so we still will do satellite projects like that, but the local office stuff we tend to stay away from now.
Well, I'm curious if you didn't have the guy who lived out there, can you think of a creative idea or option of what you would have done?
Sorry, I'm running late to a meeting. I just want to make sure I let him know. I apologize.
No worries, bro.
No, no, you're good. It's actually my dad, so he bugs the hell out of me. So what would we do now? If I ran into it, it would just be I would need to find a local person in the area that I'm hiring, that I could use
Like a sub.
as an office. Yeah, like a sub. That's a great idea actually with a sub. I didn't even think of that. I was actually thinking about a PM or super, but yeah, the sub would actually be better to partner up with a sub in that way and say, hey, I want to go after this job. I've used you. You're in the area. Can I use your office? And we do this as a J fee. You're going to end up having to give them a little percentage of the net profits to be able to use that. But that's usually not that big of a deal. I mean, they'll be fine with that as long as they're the one getting the work. It guarantees the sub the work too,
Yeah, yeah. Now, so how have you ever had a scenario where it's a mandatory pre-con meeting, but you're like, how have you ever been, what did you do to get out of the mandatory pre-con meeting? If it's a far away job or you didn't want to go to it, what strategy you used to do the pre-con meeting, but not necessarily having to drive and go sit with the customer?
Well, COVID's kind of changed that for us, specifically in California. Those mandatory pre-con meetings are virtual now. So we haven't really ran into that issue as of late, which has been great. On the areas that we have mandatory pre-cons that are way outside of our area, I just don't do them. I won't do the project because it's just outside of my area. So I try to like be very selective with the projects that we're doing because if I spread out my guys so much where they're traveling 3 or 4 hours to get to a job site, like that doesn't yield good culture at a company. It
Yeah.
yields you end up paying a lot of money for it, and there's not an amount of money that you can pay to deal with the fact of people staying away from their families. Like
Yeah.
at the end of the days, the families matter and the money doesn't, no matter what it is. I mean, you can find those. So you have a lot of traveling supers that'll kind of go anywhere for stuff, and that's just kind of their MO. We have a couple of guys like that, or had a couple of guys like that, but they're not really in alignment with our culture. So we try to make sure we're hiring people within our culture, which is we're a family-based, faith-based company. We want to make sure that we have people that are bought in over the long term with this company. We want loyalty and commitment. Usually, traveling superintendents they're just going from job to job. They don't care who the GC is, and that's not really the style of superintendent as a company that we want to have. I know it works with a lot of other companies. It's just you got to understand what your own core values are and stand firm on them.
Yes, yes. Last question on this topic regarding mandatory site visits. Sometimes they're just like, why do I have to go? I got all the specs, I got everything I need to prepare a quote. Do you have any creative strategy to overcome or avoid having to go to a mandatory site visit?
I don't, man. If it's mandatory, I mean, I've reached out to clients to see if I can talk them through about not doing a mandatory site visit, but clients want a mandatory site visit for a reason.
Yeah.
I'd be open to suggestions, to be honest, because I haven't been able to crack that nut. Usually if I tell a client like, hey, it's just a ways to go. I got everything on the plans. What am I missing? And I think the problem is that you don't not going to those mandatory visits. The client has this feeling, says you're not bought in. Like you haven't seen the site, so you're not looking at the plans with this enlightenment of seeing the site. And so I haven't been able to crack that nut personally. Like, so if I can't make the mandatory site visit, we don't go. I mean,
I had a job in California for a government wiring job, and I
mm,
just called a subcontractor, and I had him go do my mandatory site visit, and him sign in under my company name, and
oh, that's
take all
cool.
the have all the photos I needed. And then at the end, I said, "Hey, feel free to share your card to any other GCs that are there, but I plan on using you. I need you to do this for me." He's like, "All right, let's go, let's do it." And I'm in Texas.
He just acted as your representative.
Yeah,
That's a great idea. Yeah, no, I that's not something I've explored. I didn't even know that's a great idea though, because anybody can act as your representative there. So
anybody, as
and
long
that's
as they
cool
sign
because you
it.
can negotiate with the subs right in advance. You're like, yeah, I'll use you on this job if you can hit this mandatory site visit for me.
Yeah.
And that's perfect. Yeah, no, that's a great idea to be able to do that.
So I know you've got to run pretty soon. So there's so much wisdom our audience is learning from this. I'm curious about um, your tactics on percentage complete method and schedule values. Like, how are front loading it? What are some
Mhm.
strategies you're doing to front load to be able to get more cash flow on the front end?
You got to separate out what your general requirements are on the schedule of values. So a lot of GCs will have like a general requirement section or general conditions section in their proposal that says I have supervision, project management, project administration, porta potties, trailers, all that stuff, right? So what you want to do is you want to separate some of that stuff out into your schedule of values. And one of the terms we use is mobilization, right? So mobilization is like, okay, what is it going to cost me to just get mobilized on the job site? And you dump in also, you generally speaking, you can bill out the cost of bonds and insurance right off the bat as well. So your first billing, like day one, you have a mobilization billing, you have a bonds and insurance billing right on day one, in addition to all the profit you have over and above that. So you can kind of measure that mobilization is depending on the complexity of the project, what that looks like. You can break it out as well, even further. You can be like mobilization, office trailers. So you can start to break out some of your general requirements. So they're front loaded items that they show a task complete. The risk with that, and the reason I am very leery of breaking those things out, is I tend to make more money when my general requirements are higher in the schedule of values versus the front end money that you would post for to deal with cash flow. The reasoning behind that is you deal with construction delays constantly on these public jobs because the public agencies cannot meet the timeframes in their specs, right? So inevitably, you can get change orders for extended performance. The way they measure those change orders is they take the project duration and they divide it by your general requirements and they give you a daily rate associated with your general requirements. Your general requirements are PM supervision, project administration, trailer, porta potties, temp fencing, all that stuff that you have to run the job. The higher the amount of your GCs, the higher the rate. So if I have like a job, for sake of easy math, if I have a 10-month project and my general requirements for that project are $1 million, right? I'm going to have, what is that?
$1 million.
$1 million, $1 million a month in general requirements. Like these numbers are obscene. I never get $1 million a month in general requirements. I'm more like 25 to 50, depending on the
Yeah.
project. But like, just to like kind of draw that line. So now you're like, they've approved in the schedule of values, not only the time frame for your schedule, but also the amount of your general requirements. So now it's a really easy way to say, hey, you've delayed me a day. On a daily rate, my GCs are, $800 a day or $900 a day or $1,000 a day, just based off of that simple calculation. And there's not a real way for them to find it because all the projects on the public arena are all stipulated sum. So they can't really say, well, justify that cost. It says, I'm justifying it by the fact that you've approved my schedule of values and I can show you a critical path delay on my schedule.
Yes,
This is
that's
what
it.
I've associated with. This is the cost. I have it prorated out over a daily rate. And so usually what I do, what I think is good is unless I know that I'm going to have a cash flow crunch on the project, which I don't necessarily. We try to keep a lot of cash in the company so that we don't deal with cash flow crunches. But if you have to deal with cash flow, break out your general requirements so that you can front load some billing so that you can grab some money right up front. But I don't recommend doing
And why is, for contractors who still don't get it, why is it important to come to the table during the pre-con meeting and turn in your bonds and your general requirements on the first day? What does that do for your construction company in terms of getting your money faster?
it lets them know, it lets the client know exactly where everything's at. So the expectations are open, they're crystal clear, and you're dealing with those issues on the front end, right? It says these are my general requirements, this is what I'm going to have on a daily rate. Like my contracts that I write with my clients right now literally define the daily rate of my general requirements in the contract. Like I just wrote a contract the other day. It was a $815 a day calendar day delay in the event I have extended performance due to an owner's change order, right? So we talk about those things right at the pre-con. We want the guys at the pre-con to know right away, this is a problem that you guys need to know about, because in the event you delay us, there's going to be extended performance costs, and
Wow.
no public entity does a really good job of addressing extended performance cost and how to address what that cost is. They know how to address the delay itself and how to manage and to prove that delay is true and valid, but the cost for that delay, a lot of public entities don't do a really good job managing it. So it's on the contractor to show how the cost is being incurred. And the way we do it is by loading up our general requirements section in our SOV in very heavy. So we'll dump profit into it. We'll dump some insurance into it. We'll dump some labor into that. So as far as our cost is concerned, so that we can build that thing up. So in the event you get a delay, which generally speaking is inevitable, right? There is inevitable delays that you're going to end up getting paid for. You're getting paid at a massive rate to be able to deal with it.
Have you ever done that on a government job? That's
I do it all. I just did it on a government job.
that's that's wise. That's the first time I've ever heard that. And I'd love if you could share, maybe we have another call or you can share that SOV and how you did that, because this is new to me. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, curious about your departments. We're going to wrap this up. We're going to talk about your company because y'all are doing big things. Simile Construction Services. What are your departments? What different departments do you have, and how is it running? How are you running such a tight ship?
So we have three departments. We have business development, deals with sales and estimating. We have operations that deals with the building side of it, and then we have a finance department. We have a full-blown CFO. Not a lot of contractors have a full-blown CFO. I find it not only beneficial for my company, but just on a personal side when I'm buying real estate or doing stuff with the money that I'm carving out of Simile, that I have a CFO that can help me analyze stuff on my personal side. So I think there's a huge benefit for having a CFO if you can afford one. I run currently right now, I'm running the business development side. I have a director of ops that runs my operations. He's my uncle. And then I have a CFO named Dave Hinkie who runs my all my finance. All the business development sales I tend to focus on, and usually most contractors that are running their own businesses, the business development and the estimating is really the crux, because the construction, the operation side is really, it's just like it's feeding the beast, right? You already know how to do that. That's usually contractors are great mechanics, right? They know how to be able to build shit. What contractors are not good at is estimating and sales or financing, managing the books, right? So you really got to make sure that like those two categories are not like wings of your company, but integrated into your company, and really so that you have like communication about across all three platforms of your departments. Yeah.
Now you and I are both GoBundance Bros, which is a group of epic dudes who do cool stuff and have a high net worth. And audience, if you're not a part of GoBundance, just go to gobundance.com, tell them I sent you, Justin, and join it. It's epic. I'm curious, have
Or you can
you?
tell them that I sent them because then I can get the discount from Abundance.
No, no, no. I was the one that sent you. Hey, hey now. Hey, you're on my
I
show,
know,
bro.
right? I know, right?
Hey, but you are the one dropping bombs. But seriously, send them, tell them Justin sent you. Hey, life insurance. Have you explored becoming your own bank? Have you dove down that path and have your own self-directed life insurance policy?
No, we just do it. We do a standard life insurance policy with our employees through our benefit package. I haven't looked at
I'm going to
becoming my own
connect you.
bank.
I'm going to
Yeah.
connect you with a guy. I have no benefit to me, but
Yeah.
I mean, you literally are become your own bank, and
Mhm.
your money makes good money, good return, 8%, and you can take it out. So I'm going to connect you with my guy.
Yeah.
I learned that in another high-end mastermind, that
Yeah.
strategy.
Let me know,
Um,
man. That sounds awesome.
as a thank you, like that's the least I can do for you because it's benefited my life substantially, and I want to do
Mhm.
that for you as well. Curious about how are you familiar with, do you have a trust? Are you protecting your assets through a trust?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have I feel like construction is more like a harvesting company. Like you really got to harvest the profits out of it when it's there, and put profits into more passive style investments. I'm right now, I don't have a whole lot of passive investment because I'm really on the grind side of my business life. Like I'm really trying to just build business, build wealth through the construction company that we own. So I'm not doing a whole lot of passive stuff, but I do have a trust for my family, and we kind of run everything through the living trust for it. So any sort of side stuff that I do, like we have a couple of rentals that we run, that's through our living trust. The house that I'm in right now is through our living trust. So yeah, we do the whole thing through that. A lot of it's huge. My dad actually has his own living trust as well, and just the tax benefits to being able to have those assets to be able to transfer out to the next generation is just incredibly good.
And not to mention the protection. It's
Oh
sheltered.
yeah. Oh
Sheltered.
yeah.
Your assets are sheltered. And not
Mhm.
to mention, if there's ever a divorce down the road, the actual bloodline gets the asset, not the
Mhm.
divorcee.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap this up. I want to talk to you about an investment that you've made that has surprised you.
An investment that I've made that surprised me. I did one investment when I was just starting out on the development side. I was 23 years old. I bought a house on the corner of a street here in Ceres that had a Walgreens on one corner, and it was just an old dilapidated house on the other corner. It was a relatively high traffic street. I bought the house with my credit card. Um, which was just super dilapidated. We bought it, I want to say it was like 180,000 for the house.
Got
Um,
some
I
points.
put, yeah, I got some points. It was good. I was living on rice and beans for 2 years, but it was good. But we were young, and my wife and I decided to take a risk. We had a couple of partners in it. Bought a house with our credit card. I brought a realtor out there. We were thinking about converting the house to just some multifamily stuff. Realtor came out there and was like, if you buy the property behind this too, I bet I could sell it to CVS. I'm like, that sounds fantastic. So we pulled out more credit card debt and bought the house behind us as well. And we ended up developing the land and sold to CVS no more than 3 months after we had finalized the purchase on the back house. That was super surprising for me. What I realized with that is I had no idea what I was doing, but thankfully I had a ton of people I knew a lot about the development side, about the paper development of property because I had been doing that with my dad and through college and stuff. So I'd understood that process. But as far as like really thinking how well that property was going to perform, man, I mean, we bought both houses for like 380,000 and we sold it to CVS for 1.6 million. And it closed out about a year and a half later. And so we just had to paper develop that whole property. We didn't do any sort of construction work on it at all. So
Wow.
that was a huge win. I got a lot of failures too. So that one was the one that kicked it for me because I was like, man, dude, you can make money doing this stuff. So I tried a bunch more after that. did that beer and wine supply company after that. That didn't go
Let's
very
talk
well.
about
So
let's talk about an expensive lesson that was painful, where and a lesson you learned from it.
yeah. We had hired an estimator to run our estimating department at Simile a few years back. We wanted to give our goal is to grow. We've tried growing 3 or 4 times and just have never been able to breach and stay above the $50 million marker. I have a couple of unicorn projects that we're debating on whether or not to go to contract on them. It looks like they're in the bag, but it does make us scary because it's expansive growth. So my dad was trying to grow at the time. We had decided and I had just bought into the company, or was this before I bought in? Yeah, I was running it. It was before I bought in, but I was all about this new estimator. His name was Mark. This guy just, his resume, his personality, it just totally fit. Everything was fantastic. He locked us into about $25 million of work of negative profit. And, we invested a ton of time and money into this guy. He built out our entire estimating department with like 4 or 5 people. Once we realized what had happened, we were in a company downturn due to the issue, and we're like, dude, we are going to be out a ton of money on this. We ended up having to do salary reductions. I ended up dropping a bomb on the estimating department. I laid off 5 people in one day.
Oh
I'm
my
just like, you guys
gosh.
are gone. And I didn't have an estimator for about 4 months. And then I was doing the estimating myself at that time because it was just, we put all our eggs in this basket with no check and balance. And that was the issue, is that there wasn't a check and balance. So we really have been focusing. What we've built since then is a bunch of protocols for checks and balances to make sure that our margins are being protected, that we're bidding things properly. We're making sure that we have exclusions dialed in, and that no person can independently decide what the profit is in our company, not even myself. I want to have buy-in from our team based off of where we're currently sitting on overhead, what we're currently sitting on backlog. So we're way more team oriented right now and a lot more communication. But I mean, that situation probably cost our company $2 million over a 2 year period, and that'll wipe us out. Like that'll wipe. At the time, it almost did, and that was just putting your trust in the wrong people and then not having a good check and balance at the time. I would
Yeah,
say that was probably the worst investment that I ever. Investments in labor are the most advantageous and most risky out
yeah.
there.
So the lessons you learned are the checks and balance. You got to have proper margins. You have to have exclusions in your contracts. Any other lessons on that? Because that's an expensive lesson. That's the most expensive lesson I've had on my podcast.
Yeah, no, it was very expensive. The other thing is just keep cash in the bank, man. If the economy takes a downturn, have enough money to keep your team, because your team is going to get poached. People that do have money and do have good jobs, they're going to be offering massive amounts of money to grab the team members. If you have to lay them off or reduce salaries, you're going to lose those guys. And what the problem is that the negative effect of that over the future, could be more substantial than the pain of paying those people now. So keep cash in the bank. Like right now, we are in a heavy cash position. We have about $4.3 million in the bank right now. We only honestly need probably about 750,000 to operate our company and keep good cash flow. So we want to have a bunch of cash in the bank. So if we run into issues, but like even now, like a lot of the projects that we're doing right now, they require us to front load the projects for the owners because the financing can't keep up with the construction cost. So we're financing projects ourselves right now, and then
And
just
then
charging the owners.
yeah, you get that paid back by the bank or the owner.
And yeah, and with interest too. I mean, so it just adds more money to our bottom line. But having the money allows us to do the work, allows us to keep people busy, and then once the financing finally does through, then we get the money back. And everybody's still got a job.
Wow, love it. I'd say the last two questions are, what would y'all have been through a lot. Y'all have had ups and downs. Simile Construction is now crushing at $35 million, doing tens of millions of dollars in government contracts and private and commercial. What would you say is the best process in your company that you or your father or your family is most proud of?
I'm really proud of the way we track our profit now. So we didn't really have any sort of accountability structure on profit, and we would see profit fade. This is before I took it over, but we had my dad when we were smaller, we were doing about 15 million when my dad was running it. We've doubled in size since I've taken it over, which has been great. And we're projecting to double in size within the next 2 years as well, which is awesome. But what we ran into is that at 15 million, it's easy to keep your finger on the pulse of where your profits are sitting on jobs. So when you're communicating with your bonding company, you can give them reliable profit projections, and you're not showing profit fade. Once you get larger and you start to have more projects and it becomes harder to keep your pulse on the job, you really want to be able to manage your gross profit. You want to make sure that you are not having profit fade over the long term, because that profit fade will lose your bonding. So you want to be able to make sure that. So we implemented a process called estimating misses and extra work over budgets. And so anytime there's an estimating miss, that commitment, that cost, that potential cost goes back to the estimator for the estimator to try to figure out how it was missing the estimate, if it was missing the estimate, or if the money was budgeted elsewhere, or what the expectations were, right? So if we can figure out a way to belittle that estimating miss. So I got an estimating miss the other day for about $4,500 for some windows that weren't accounted for in one of our budgets. We look at it like, dang, $4,500 hit, right? That's right to our bottom line. So how do we address that? So we look at that $4,500 hit. We gave it to our estimator. We reviewed the plans. We realized that miss is a quantity error actually on the plans, and it's not an estimating miss. It's a miss by the owner. And so we were able to push that back into our operations through this process that we have, push that back into our operations, give them an avenue to go after it with the client. And we were able to actually make money on what could have been an estimating miss. And before that time frame, our process is that it would just flow right through. There was no back check. Our PM would just swipe it off as an estimating miss, and the profit would be gone. So we have that we've addressed now. We also have what's called extra work over budget, and those are operational problems. So like you go out there and you frame a door wrong, right? We have to go out there and reframe the door, and it's an operational problem. Or you schedule a subcontractor to come out and you're not ready for them, and now they hit you with a remob to come back out for it. That's an operational miss into your budget. It's not something that you were expecting. So what we do is we track that on a percentage basis and on a dollar basis every single week. So we see like where we're sitting on that to make sure that we're finding anything that's reoccurring. So like we had found just over the last 6 months that we were getting reoccurring estimating misses for export, that we weren't calculating our export properly. So we found that issue out. We discussed it as a team, and we figured out a way now in the next estimates to make sure that we're not having export related estimating misses anymore. Right, where so you find those systemic problems through these misses that you get through your project, and then you try to figure out ways to avoid those systemic problems. We had on the operational side, we were getting misses on. We have a very small self-performed crew, but the work that they do, is important to us. It's mostly customer related. But I just had our guys go out and pour some concrete, and they just did a shoddy job, ended up having to rip it out and replace it. That's an extra work over budget. And so we had to do that. It happened twice on 2 different projects in a matter of 2 months. And I'm like, this is systemic. We need to do a training for our guys if we're going to have them do concrete. So we did a training for our guys. We actually did it right out in my front patio and had them pour concrete for me at my own house, where I brought my guys out. We did a full-blown training for them to say, this is how you pour concrete, so that in the future we don't have another extra work over budget. And they've been formally trained in those categories. So those two processes of managing costs, managing issues before you have cost to it is the goal. But if even managing, knowing what those issues are, understanding if they're systemic, and then addressing that systemic problem is key. And that's the awareness factor that we have with the estimating miss process and the EWAB process.
Gosh, dude, this is fire, dude. Joseph Simile with Simile Construction Services, they have mastered the 4-part federal construction secrets. They know how to find the deals, they know how to bid the deals, they know how to get the jobs done, and they know how to bill their client, their government properly. Y'all are crushing it, man. And the last thing I want to say is you have a process. If you could just in a couple sentences, you're estimating the deals, then you have an operations check it, and then how does the process work?
Mm.
One last time.
No,
Your
that's fine. So we
estimator.
get, yeah, so our estimators come in, they bid a job. If we get the job awarded, the owner says it's our job. I, as the owner, want to control all the contracts. That's just a thing for me. I want to make sure the contracts are delivered properly, and it keeps me a pulse of what jobs we're doing, right? So I will write up and work through the owner and the client with the contracts as good rapport building. Once those contracts are done, we try to get all of our we transfer that project. We have a meeting called a transfer of information meeting. And what estimating does is this brain dump of this is how we bid the job. This is how we planned on building it. Here's our project schedule that we put together. Here's our sub team. Here's our job roadblocks. Here's the insurance requirements. There's everything you need to know about the project ops. And operations will take that, they'll grab it, and then they start to shake out those bids. So they'll look at our subcontractor bids that we provided. They'll confirm the scopes, reconfirm the scopes with them, draw them into contract. So over 2 weeks, we try to get all of our subcontracts out. About 80% of the big guys, really, you really want to get the front end guys and the big guys done in the first 2 weeks. You'll get some stragglers like partitions and accessories, painting, and I don't know, cleaning, final cleaning. Those will kind of tailor in whenever they do, but they're small enough portions of the job that you're not really concerned about it, right? So once you get that 80% done, you really focus on your submittal process. You get all your submittal done, you work through your procurements, you find out if you have any procurement issues. In the meantime, you're having weekly meetings, not only with your subcontractors, but also with your clients to walk through where you're sitting on the process and how the process is going through construction. You're dealing with all of your owner related delays, city related delays, any sort of issues that you may have on a job. You're addressing it weekly, not only with your ownership, but with your sub team. We get to the end of the job and we punch it out internally. We'll do an internal. I just did a job walk for a church that we're finishing up. We do an internal punch list prior to the owner coming out. So we want our punch lists. Our goal is to have our punch list less than a page, right? We want to be able to fit our punch list less than a page with our clients. And 9 times out of 10, our punch lists end up being half owner requested change orders, half issues that we need to address out in the field. And then we hand them over the keys and we throw a party for them at the end with a big old tree or basket or something to show our love for them, depending on the project. If it's a good feel good project, like we just did Jessica's house in Turlock, and man, what a beautiful project. They deal with grief counseling in a massive 16,000 square foot house. Like it's just beautiful house.
A retreat kind of place.
Oh, it's amazing. The whole courtyard is amazing. I mean, it was just absolutely beautiful. And it was such a great feel-good project. Simile ended up even donating money to them at the end of the job, just saying, hey, we're just going to give you a credit. Not only did the job go good for us, but we want to give you guys a credit because we think what you guys are just doing is amazing. That's part of the reason we live all the nonprofit stuff is just, it's nice to have subs, and it's nice for our subs and it's nice for our employees to see that you have a feel good project every now and then instead of just a office complex that really doesn't, it's great. It's an office complex. It's fantastic. It pays the bills. But when you do something like that, like these nonprofits for churches where you can really see, and these nonprofits for like Jessica's House and AgSafe and all these other ones that we've done, you can just see the love that these people have for it. I mean, these people literally scratched and scraped for every dollar that they have in these budgets. So being able to like do those has just been huge. So we'll do something huge at the end, and we try to do really great groundbreaking ceremonies with them and openings. And yeah, that's a process, man. It's a ton of fun.
talk about recording that right there for your marketing. That right there you could use for your marketing. That's brilliant. Yeah. And on top of that, that's a great way to increase your culture within your company. The last thing we got for a contractor who's on the fence, who's maybe doing less than 10 million, and they're looking at, hey, I want to learn how to do federal contracts. What would you say to that person?
I would say go for it. The thing that you're going to need to watch out for really is making sure that the prevailing wage requirements are being addressed properly. There's a lot of paperwork that's associated with it. So talk to your accountant, that's somebody that specializes in that. You want to make sure that you're dealing with all those items because they will bite you in the ass, and that's really where you get hit. Everything else on is actually a lot easier. The public arena is like way easier than the private because people aren't as it's not as personal, right? The public arena, it's public money, so it's not as personal when you say, "Hey, you got an issue with your plans." You tell that to a client that is building a one-off like car dealership or something like that. That change order is coming right out of their pocket. You know what I mean? It's like so hard to have that conversation with them. So on the public side, it's clear. So like those are the easy things to address. You're like, it's not on the plans. It doesn't exist. It's just like that old Yellow Pages commercial. And they say, okay, we're going to give you a change order for it. And the change order terms are dictated in your contract and everything's very simple. The hardest part is managing the prevailing wage requirements, sub sign-in sheets, like all the stuff that you have to do to make sure that you're working with the unions properly and all that stuff. You have to make sure you're dialed in on that. And if you don't feel like you have that comfortability, it will eat you alive. So make sure you're prepped for that. You've communicated with the right people and that you have somebody that can manage that in your office, making sure that your DOS 140 forms go out to the unions to let them know that you're going to be doing specific work at a trade that they're responsible to provide, because the unions may want to send out somebody to your job site for training, and they have that right in the state of California to do that. So really having somebody that knows the prevailing wage sector is huge. I would suggest ABC is a really good resource for that. If you haven't had that, that's a really good resource. The other good resource I would say would be your accountant. They usually have bookkeepers and people on other GCs that have had that. Look for a construction related accountant. They were going to have a lot more resources on how to address those items. And you'll end up paying more money on these front ends. But once you get used to that process of dealing with how to deal with the prevailing wage requirements and the payrolls associated with it and all the requirements with it, once you get used to it, it becomes easy. It really does, because it's like it's very standard. It becomes standard building practices, just like you're doing a project. So that's what I would
Dude,
recommend.
man, and Upwork is another good resource. We found our
Mm,
accountant person who does all our prevailing, all our wage, everything, Alpha Upwork,
mm,
somebody in the Philippines, and they're a great asset for our company. This has been
yeah.
a blast. Joseph, you have crushed it, dude. Joseph Simile with Simile Construction Services, expert contractor doing big things in the private, commercial, and the government sector. $35 million this year. Best of luck to you closing on that $75 million project, bro. Thank you for being on the
I
Real
need it.
Construction. Thanks for being on the Real Construction Owners podcast today.
You got it, man. Thanks so much, Justin. You have a good day, bud.